My apologies. I guess I left that last one just like cliffhanging. So, um, Vlad just got dragged under the bus. So, it wasn't your fault. Joan placed a hand on his shoulder. He was trying to kill me. The driver looked at Joan, dazed. Vlad's upper body was still pinned under the tire. His lower body was gone. Joan watched as his face contorted, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. The pain must have been unimaginable. Then, after a moment, the twitching stopped. Joan turned on her heels and walked away. She hadn't gotten half a block when someone honked from the other side of the street. Tom. He parked and hurried to her, his face awash with concern. Are you okay? She nodded, unsure of her voice. At any moment Joan felt as if her legs would give out. What happened? Glad. Tom looked around, focusing on the traffic backup. Where is he? He caught a bus. Tom reached out to her, took her wa- Tom reached out to her, took her hand. Joan hurt in a dozen places, and her emotions were fried. She made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob, and then she hugged him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, patting her back, rubbing her hair, rocking her gently to and fro. I talked to Roy. They saved the VP. You okay? Remember what I said earlier about it being anticlimactic? Tom nodded. I take it back. Joan buried her face into his chest, letting go of the fear and pain. They stood like that, embracing each other, until the ambulance came and scraped up what was left of Vlad. The horrors of the last few days, and the emptiness Joan realized she had been feeling for years, all seemed to melt away in Tom's arms. For the very first time since she moved away from home, she felt safe, and it was the best feeling in the world. Chapter 30, Washington, D.C. I want them dead. Phil had never heard his father so upset. He stared at the speakerphone, trying to imagine the look on his face, but none came to mind. There was no precedent for it. Dad, calm down. We'll have another chance. Have them killed, Junior. Hire mercenaries. Pay the mafia. I want them hunted down and gutted like deer. It unnerved Phil more than he cared to say. Dad was always a pillar, a rock. But his voice was cracking, and he seemed to be losing all control. We'll get them, Dad. We've got the airports covered. We froze their credit and their bank accounts. I've got people in LA tying Joan and Tom to the murder of her assistant. We also have Abe in custody. Is he giving anything up? So far, he's not saying anything. We can only hold him for 48 hours without pressing charges. Then charge him with something, damn it. He really didn't do anything other than disturbing the peace. Make something up. Use your brain. Dad went into a coughing jag, and Phil poured himself some scotch. For the first time, the very first time, he was beginning to doubt his father. It scared Phil, because it was like doubting himself. Dad, I'm taking care of it. You need a rest. The operation maybe it's left you a little unnerved. There was a pause. Phil wondered if he had perhaps pushed too far. When his father finally answered, his voice was small, quiet. This is our dream, Junior. I know, Dad. 35 years in the making. We've sacrificed so much. Even with a new kidney, I won't be around forever. You'll always be around. I'm your legacy. Oh, cut the sentimental bullshit. I'm the one who started this. I want to be around to reap the rewards. If I can't be there to see you take the oath, it was a waste of my whole life. I spoke to the Secret Service. They don't even know that there were any assassination attempts. We can try again. Soon. Same plan. There'll be another chance later this month. First, we have to get rid of these damn clones. Another coughing fit. Phil drained the scotch and reached for the bottle. Maybe I should come down to the house, visit for a few days. His father was silent. I'll free up my schedule, Phil thought out loud. I haven't seen you in a while anyways. Maybe we can throw the ball around like old times. We never threw the ball around. Yeah, well, never too late to start. His father's voice became very cold. I don't need you to worry about me. I need you to do your fucking job. I'll see you in a day or two. Bye, Dad. He hung up the phone and called his travel agent to book the flight. Dad was wrong. Phil wasn't worried about his father in the least. He was worried about himself. Chapter 31. Springfield. And it starts with a list. 1 cordless drill. 1 portable stepladder. 1 funnel. 1 crowbar. 9 cans of insulation, foam insulation. 1 20-pound bag of powdered cement. 2 rolls of duct tape. 1 caulking gun. 1 gravity knife. 2 M18 taser guns. 1 can Guard Alaska bear repellent. 1 aluminum police baton. 4 Kevlar vest with trauma plates. Tom looked at the equipment spread out on the motel bed. Bert and Roy arrived the day before Joan and Tom and had done the shopping. It's a good thing Springfield has an army surplus store. Joan seemed unimpressed. This is all we'll need to break into Stang's place? Roy nodded. Bert and I checked the place out. Security is tight, but it can be beaten. The only rough spot will be Stang's assistant, Jerome Huntington. Did a background check. Would you believe that guy was a Navy SEAL? Tom could believe it. Not too many people in the healthcare industry carried pistols. Besides, there was something about Jerome, some sort of vibe he gave off that frightened Tom. Shouldn't we get some guns or something? Joan gave Tom a nervous glance. They had left theirs in L.A. rather than risk taking them on an international flight. And Roy had lost his in the river. Illinois had a mandatory waiting period to buy firearms, so they couldn't get any tonight. The taser's almost as good. It shoots 2 probes up to 15 feet away, 100 feet per second. Sends a pulse that completely overrides the skeletal muscles, causing uncontrollable contractions and massive disorientation for up to 15 minutes. Even works through a bulletproof vest. And I'm fine with this. Bert picked up a can the size of a small fire extinguisher and read from the label. Shoots a thick fog of blinding pepper spray up to 20 feet away. Guaranteed to stop a rampaging grizzly or your money back. Tom wondered who would be alive to receive the refund if the product didn't work, but he kept that to himself. Bert and I got you a police baton, Joan. Roy handed her an aluminum billy club with a black rubber grip. Roughly 2 feet long. We figured, with your martial arts background. Joan palmed the weapon and did something very fast with her fingers to make it twirl. Tom detected the slightest trace of a smile on her lips. This will do, he said. When 2 a.m. finally rolled around, they loaded up the gear and drove to Stang's place. Tom parked off-road in a copse of trees about a mile away. The night was windy and dark in the way it never got in the city. They hoofed it the remainder of the way, ducking in the ditch alongside the road when the infrequent car drove past. It was slow going. The equipment was heavy, and everyone was nursing injuries. Even though he was cold, Tom's hands were sweating in the latex gloves. There was no doubt that Stang would recognize them, but none of them were keen on living fingerprints. The iron fence around the perimeter of the mansion was for show rather than security. Roy was able to pry a bar loose, and they all slipped through onto the grounds. The house and lawn were reasonably well lit. After a brief discussion, it was decided the northwest corner of the building would be the best approach. Not only was it harder to see things on an angle, but most of the windows on those 2 sides appeared to have their shades drawn. Between the fence and the house was about an acre of carefully maintained grass. They took it in a sprint, moving as fast as they could. Midway there, Tom tripped over a recessed sprinkler head, the step ladder clattering to the ground before him. Roy and Joan helped him up, kept them going. When all of them finally had their backs against the cool brick wall of the mansion, it took a few minutes to catch their collective breaths. Tom listened to the wind, expecting at any moment to hear a police siren approaching. None did. They began the break-in. Roy pointed out the first annunciator? It was a large metal box the size of a medicine cabinet, painted white and attached to the wall about 10 feet high off the ground. Inside was a horn, and a big one by the look of it. Tom set the ladder underneath and climbed up to get started. There were slats cut into the box like vents in a school locker. Using a pen light, Tom peered through the slit to see the cover lock. It was wired. Opening the box would set off the alarm. Bert handed up a can of aerosol foam. Tom attached a tube to the nozzle and stuck it through the slats, filling up the annunciator's horns. The foam was used in basements and attics to seal cracks and leaks and prevent heat loss. It dried quickly and had excellent insulating properties. When the throat was full, Tom used 2 more cans to completely cover the outside of the horn. Then he sealed the vents with caulk, drilled a hole in the top of the box, and used the funnel to pour in dry concrete. That would fill any remaining pockets of air inside the box. The principle was simple. Sound travels through the air in waves. By replacing a gas with a solid, the sound waves had no way to escape and were effectively muffled. It would be like trying to scream with your head under water, except powdered concrete and foam insulation were quite a bit denser than H2O. After getting the knack of it, Tom was able to finish the second and third annunciators quickly. When he was done, he found Roy and the others at a first-floor window. They had completely covered the glass in duct tape. It was no longer a question of finesse. They were simply going to jimmy the window open. The alarms would go off, but hopefully they had been dampened enough so that no one would hear them. The duct tape was to prevent the glass from shattering and making noise. Tom and Roy shoved their crowbars in the window jamb and jacked it up. There was some creaking when the pane splintered. Tom found the magnetic switch recessed in the frame and slid the window fully open. Check the annunciator. Bert walked her to the nearest one and cocked up an ear. I hear a faint whining sound, really quiet. They were in. Tom eased himself through the window and onto the carpeted floor of a dark room. He briefly flicked on his pen light. Shelves, books, a library. Tom made his way to the door and put his ear to it. No sound. He gripped the handle and turned it slowly, easing it open. It led out into a hallway. To the right, around the corner, was a faint light. Tom motioned for the others to follow. The hallway ended in the foyer. The wall-sized aquarium glowed blue, peppering the grand staircase with streaks of muted light. Tom went up quickly. The stairs were a bad place to get surprised. The taser felt comfortable in his hand. It was lighter than the revolver he'd been carrying, but his muscle memory treated it like any other normal gun. Finger on the trigger, ready to point and shoot. The police have a different standard of safety when it comes to gun safety. Instead of having the finger above the trigger, because they don't have time to just take that moment to move it, a lot of times they will rest it on the trigger. Probably military too, I'm not sure. I guess it's the difference of what you're expecting. In the darkness, the horrific pictures on the walls look even worse. I don't know if you remember earlier in the book they had like Vlad the Impaler, impaled bodies, and mutilations and such. Shadows seemed to intensify the many expressions of pain. Tom ignored them, pressing onward. Movement at the top of the staircase. A pair of glowing eyes stared down at him. Functioning on instinct, Tom leaned to the side and fired. The two probes hissed through the air and made a faint crackling sound when they found their target. Tom climbed the last few stairs, taking a look. On its back, four legs sticking straight up in the air, was a cat. It jerked every few seconds as the gun continued to pulse. "You get him?" Joan whispered from behind. Tom turned off the juice and pulled out the probes. He reloaded them into the gun barrel. The cat went limp, but it seemed to be breathing fine. He changed the gas cartridge and checked the battery. The feline rolled onto its feet and stared at them, one eye crossed. All of its fur seemed to be standing on end, so it kind of resembled a porcupine. "Sorry, kitty." The cat walked on wobbly legs to the second floor railing and squeezed through the bars. Then it fell 20 feet straight down, hitting the foyer floor with a thump. "I thought cats always landed on their feet," Joan whispered. Tom put his fingers to his lips and looked down the hallway, dark and quiet. If Stang was still recovering from his operation, there was a good chance he might still be in the drawing room. That's where Tom decided to check first. He moved warily, as if he were in a haunted house, and anything might jump out at any moment. When he reached the door, there was a dim light coming through the bottom crack. He held his breath and listened. Faint snoring. Tom went in fast. Stang was on the bed, his head propped up against the giant headboard with pillows. A thin line of saliva was escaping his open mouth. The dialysis machine next to him was silent, and a small nightlight plugged into the wall bathed the room in a faint yellow glow. Tom was on it in 2 steps, gravity knife pressed to the old man's flabby neck. "Wake up!" Stang peeked his eyes open. When he saw who was standing over him, his eyes widened to an almost comic level. "Where's Jerome?" Tom asked. "2 rooms over, same side. What kind of weapons are in this house?" "He has a gun." "How many?" "Just one." Tom took the knife and held it in front of Stang's face, near his right eye. Fear made the senator's thin lips tremble. "How many?" "A lot. A shotgun, an M16, some bladed weapons." Stang's voice was soft, defeated. It was a far cry from the confident, cocky man who had threatened their lives only a few days ago. "Anyone else in the house?" Stang looked away, saying nothing. Tom lowered the knife to the old man's waist. "I'd be happy to reopen these stitches for you." His frail body shook. "My son is here. Room across the hall." Tom motioned for Joan to come over. "This is the guy who sent Vlad after you. Keep an eye on him." Joan twirled a baton and swung at the old man's head, stopping the club an inch from his eyes. Stang yelped, and she gave him a little tap on the nose. "You won't give me any trouble." Tom corralled Bert and Roy into the hall. "Bert, that's Mr. Speaker's room. If he comes out, give him the gentle bend treatment." Bert nodded and crouched before the door like a defensive tackle. The bear spray was clutched in both hands, pointing forward. "Jerome is heavily armed," Tom whispered to Roy. "Shotgun and an M16. They sidled up to his door, silent. No sound was coming from inside. Tom gripped the knob and counted quietly. On 3, he yanked the door open and Roy went in low and to the right. Tom flanked him, covering the left. The room was moderate size. Tom scanned it quickly. Desk, dresser, open closet, bed, empty. On the monitor, on the nightstand next to the lamp, was a baby monitor. "Enough talking." Joan's voice came through the speaker. That meant the transmitter was in Stang's room, and Jerome had heard everything. He might already be on the phone with police. Tom hurried to the nightstand, reaching for the receiver. The bullet hit him in the lower back, the force of the shot knocking him forward. The pain was instant and terrible, like being whacked with a 10-pound pickaxe. Tom fell to the floor, face first. He heard the boom of the second shot, felt the impact between the shoulders. It knocked the wind out of him and hurt so bad Tom wondered if the bullet had somehow gone through the vest. Was Jerome using something high caliber, or an armor-piercing slug that could penetrate a Kevlar weave? Tom tried to roll over, to fire back, but his body wasn't responding correctly. The best he could manage was turning onto his side. He saw Jerome, crouching under the desk. The pistol was aiming away from Tom, towards Roy, but Roy was faster. Tom watched as the probes hit Jerome in the neck and chest, a tiny arc of blue electricity causing his upper body to snap backwards like a jackknife. The desk toppled over, and the gun went flying. Jerome began to jerk and twitch. Then he doubled over into a fetal position, his whole body shuddering as the taser sent pulse after pulse into him. Roy set down the gun and hurried to Tom. "Am I bleeding?" His partner's fingers probed the vest. "No." The vest stopped them both. "Doesn't feel like it." There was a scream from the hallway. Roy yanked Tom to his feet and they hurried out of the room. Phil Jr., in pajamas, was rolling around on the floor, clawing at his eyes. "It hurts! It hurts!" Bert was standing over him. He looked at Tom and shrugged. "I only gave him a little squirt." Tom took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. He hurt. Even worse than when his ribs did after Attila had kicked him. The people who sold bulletproof vests hadn't bothered to mention this little fact. There might have been less pain if the bullets had just gone all the way through. Tom unclipped a roll of duct tape from his belt and walked over to Phil. He placed a knee in the small of his back and applied pressure. "I'll give you $50,000 to wash off my face." Tom pried Phil's hands away from his eyes and taped his wrist behind his back. "Please wipe it off, sweet mother of mercy." "Mr. Speaker, if you keep screaming, I'm gonna let him spray you again." The third most powerful man in America rubbed his face on the carpet and whimpered. Roy dragged Jerome out into the hall. He was also trussed up with duct tape, but Roy had taken the added precaution of wrapping his legs as well. It seemed kind of redundant. The guy was down for the count. "Here's why it hurts so bad." Roy walked over and handed Tom a large semi-automatic. "He shot you with a .45. A .45 caliber handgun was military issue, a real cannon, but it was preferable to a shotgun or M16. Tom felt incredibly lucky. Joan poked her head out of the drawing room and stared at the group. "Everything okay out here?" "I got shot." Tom held up two fingers. "Twice." "You've got a vest on." "But look how big the gun is." Tom showed her the .45. Joan disappeared back into the room. Roy patted Tom's shoulder. Some ladies are hard to impress. Bert managed to get the blinded Phil to his feet and led him down the hall. Tom and Roy dragged Jerome after him. They gathered around Stang's bed. The old man's face was pure malice. With his bald head and wrinkles, he looked like a snapping turtle. "You need to hire better help." Roy pulled Jerome into a corner of the room. "I know nurses at County General who can shoot a lot better than this guy." Tom sat on the bed and held the gun in front of Stang's face. "Where's all the research papers?" "In the basement. There's a secret door on the first floor. Junior will show you." "Dad, I can't see." Roy gave Jerome a light slap on the cheek. Jerome began to snore. "This one's in no shape to show us around either. That leaves you to guide the tour, Senator." "I'm recovering from a major operation." "Bert, I think Phil Jr. needs more bear juice." Bert aimed the canister at the younger man's face. The Speaker of the House cringed. "Take them, Dad, take them." Stang snarled. "There's a wheelchair in the closet." Tom opened it up and found the latest electric model. Stang gave instructions on how to work it, and Bert drove it next to the bed. Roy and Bert lifted the old man and set him on the padded seat. Joan looked at Tom. "How can a wheelchair go down the stairs?" pretty damn quick. Stang glowered. There's an elevator. Tom instructed Roy and Bert to keep watch over the hostages and held open the door. Joan went out first, followed by the whirring sound of Stang in the automatic wheelchair. So far, everything had gone more or less according to plan. If their luck held, it would all be over very soon. If their luck held. Tom checked the clip on the 45. 6 bullets left. The hard part is over, Tommy. From here on out, it's cake. Bert nodded in agreement. Let's finish this up. Get out of here. Tom gripped the gun tightly and walked out the door, hoping they were right. Chapter 32. Springfield. The lift is on the other side of the hallway. Stang's voice was tired. He pushed the little joystick on the armrest all the way forward, but his chair didn't roll any faster than walking speed. There's something I wanted to ask. Tom rested the gun on Stang's shoulder. Why the hell did you create us anyways? I'm asking myself that same question right now. It was all about power. Explain. The old man cleared his throat. I couldn't ever be president, being born in Germany. So, from birth, I've been grooming my son for the job. But winning an election has little to do with ability. Sometimes it comes down to different hot issues, or party support, or running mates, or looks, or 100 other ridiculous reasons. I decided to stack the deck. They reached the end of the hall. An old-fashioned elevator, complete with metal folding gate, was waiting for them. Tom opened the door as Stang talked. So I cloned the greatest people in history to align them with my son. It was a no-lose situation. If greatness was genetic, we'd have all the political savvy of Jefferson and Lincoln, all the brilliance of Einstein and Edison, Shakespeare to write the best speeches, and the military strategy of Robert E. Lee. The senator had become more energetic, gesturing with his free hand and raising his voice. And even if you turned out to be idiots, you still had the famous faces, the famous names. Tom, I had planned on you to become vice president. Name someone in America who wouldn't vote for you. Democrat, Republican, it wouldn't matter. If my son had you as a running mate and announced Lincoln as a future Secretary of State, Einstein as Secretary of Education, and so on, it'd be a sure thing. Robert E. Lee would capture the Southern vote. Joan of Arc would get the women. We'd be unstoppable. Tom shut the door to the elevator, and Stang instructed him to pull the switch down. He did, and the lift began to descend. You think America would vote for clones? Of course not. But I had papers made, all proving lineage to the people you've been cloned from. Tom, you were Jefferson's great-great-great-grandson. All of you had all the genealogy. America would have eaten it up. Let me guess what happened. Edison figured out he was a clone? Stang sighed. He appeared to partially deflate. It started before that. I had managed to recruit some of the others, Vlad, Attila, Jack, and Bill, a.k.a. Shakespeare. But when I tried to recruit Robert E. Lee, he refused, threatened to go public. That wouldn't do. The United States would vote for a descendant of Robert E. Lee, but mention the word clone and everyone starts crowing about religion and messing with the forces of nature. I think it would also be a human rights violation. So you killed him. Of course. And then Jessup, Edison, figured it out by himself. I knew he did because I've been keeping tabs on all of you since you were born. But when I offered him the chance to join, he balked as well. By then, Edison knew, and you, since none of you showed even a shred of political potential anyways. Tom followed the twisted train of thought. You decided to cut your losses and get rid of us? The elevator stopped on the first floor, but Tom didn't move to open the door. I created you. It's my right to destroy you. If you play God, you're allowed to play it to the hilt. Tom felt like throttling the guy. Everything, all the death, all the fighting, just because of some megalomaniac's ego? But I had no idea. Joan looked down at Stang. Why try to murder me? I would have lived out the rest of my life not knowing. Tom had one of those moments where everything suddenly became clear. He knew the reason, the real reason why Stang had to kill them all. You were still a possible threat. Stang had to make sure no one ever knew that human cloning was possible. He said it himself. The United States, yeah, the United States would never elect a clone. Tom stared at Stang, especially a clone of a man who was born in Germany. Joan looked at Tom, confused. Then her eyes got big. The Speaker of the House? Tom nodded. Phil Jr. Chip off the old block. Stang couldn't become president, so he cloned himself. If his clone became president, it was almost the same thing. Stang looked like he'd bitten into a lemon. I had a right to hold that office. One stupid, archaic law kept me out. So you created all of us to help your clone win the election, and when it turned out that we would do more harm than good, Stang looked ready to spit venom. I found another way to win the Oval Office, without an election, without a platform, without a group of worthless freaks like you. I've watched you both, your whole lives pathetic. A woman who once saved France, reduced to a pimp who makes bad movies. And a man who once created a new nation, now just another dumb pig. His eyes were narrow and flecks of spit dotted his lips and chin. My son, he's my blood, my genes, he's me. You two are just some chemicals we cooked up in a lab. You aren't even human. I'm not sure you have the right, I'm not sure you're the right person to judge humanity, Stang. The old man slumped in his chair. Tom opened the folding gate, and they went into the hallway. Where? The next room. There's a hidden door. It was a trophy room. Deer heads and trout mounted on oak plaques and hanging on all four walls. A fireplace was in one corner, a matching sofa and chair arranged around it on the wooden floor. Tom checked the room out, top to bottom, and couldn't find any evidence of a hidden door. That's because it's hidden, Stang snapped. Go to that bookcase and take out the volume of Moby Dick. Tom found the book and pulled on it, half expecting a secret passage to open. None did. He flipped through the book, and it appeared normal. What's the deal? Hold the book against the wall, just above the light switch. It's a magnetic lock. Then flip the switch up. Tom did as instructed, and there was a clicking noise. Several wood panels in the center of the floor had risen up about an inch. Tom knelt down and realized it was a trap door, the seams hidden by the natural cut of the wood. He pulled open the hatch and flashed his penlight into the hole. A staircase. At the bottom there's a keypad. The code is 61694. Punch it in and the door will open. There's a short hallway, and at the end of the hall there's another door with another lock. Same code. That's my safe. The papers are in there. Tom sniffed the air. It was stale and something else. Musky. Want me to go? Tom shook his head at Joan. Stay here. If anything happens to me, tell my partner to snap Stang's neck. He took the stairs slowly. When he reached the bottom, he figured he was about 20 feet underground. A large aluminum door blocked his path. Tom found the keypad to his left and punched in the numbers. There was a clang and a hiss, and the door clicked open. Tom was hit by a wave of cool, damp air. Damp. Really don't want damp air for papers. The musky smell was stronger, more acrid. He pushed the door inward and aimed the penlight down the dark hall. There's a light switch. Stang called to him. On the wall, to the right. Tom located the switch. He flipped it up, bathing the narrow hallway with pale yellow light. Looking ahead about 15 feet, he saw another metal door. This one appeared larger, stronger. It also had a big metal slot in the center with a slide bar. Tom had seen a similar contraption on a door in the solitary confinement wing at Joliet State Penitentiary. It had been the food slot. Violent inmates could receive their meals without the risk of opening the door. Hey, Stang, what's this thing in the middle of the door? I can put valuables into the safe without opening it up. Tom didn't know if he bought that. His back hurt, his ribs hurt, and now he felt a sharp stab of paranoia. He approached cautiously, gun in hand. Being careful, he pulled back the slat on the door and tried to peer inside. It was dark, and his penlight didn't penetrate very far. An awful stench came through the slot, the smell of death. Tom thought it over. What if this wasn't a safe at all? What if it was some kind of private graveyard? Actually, that would be a good thing. If Stang was burying dead bodies under his house, they wouldn't need all the cloning evidence to put him away. Local law enforcement would take care of him, and the media would take care of his son. Tom punched in the code, and the door unlocked. This one opened outwards rather than inwards. He peered inside the room, awash in the awful smell, trying to see in the darkness. He called to Stang. Is there a light? On the far wall. It's only a few feet inside. What's that awful smell? An animal buried under the house and died. We haven't been able to find it. That sounded like a big granddaddy lie. Tom took a step into the room, trying to steel himself against any possible shock. He didn't see it, but he immediately sensed something directly in front of him. The hairs on his neck stood up, and he aimed his gun forward. By then, there was movement on both sides of him as well. Tom managed to fire twice before he got knocked off his feet. He landed on his back, hard. Something was on top of him, moaning and snarling. Tom felt rancid breath, hair, teeth. Mad dog? No, worse. Much worse. He managed to push the attacker at arm's length and got a look. It was a man with wild eyes, long hair, and a ragged beard, black and jagged teeth. On his forehead, beneath the grime, Tom could make out a long scar, deep and old. And if the shock could get any greater, Tom was stunned to recognize the face. It was Stang. The man tore at Tom with filthy fingernails. Another man stood over them both. He was also Stang, with a similar scar on his forehead, but this one was cleaner looking. Tom saw that he was holding something at his side, a white bandage stained with some blood, right in the spot where a kidney would go. No wonder Stang was able to get so many organ transplants. He had his own personal supply, locked away down here, and always a perfect tissue match. Stang must have kept all of Harold's early cloning experiments and then raised them to be spare parts. The thought horrified Tom. Have they been locked up here their whole lives? The clone on top of him continued to growl and attack, and Tom noted that three more scrambled out of the darkness of the cell and ran down the hall. Joe! Tom tried to call out, but a grimy hand forced its way into his mouth, cutting off his voice. His gun arm was pinned. Tom grunted and with all of his effort managed to roll his attacker over and get on top of him. He brought up his gun and aimed at the clone's chest, firing 2 shots. Almost immediately he was hit from behind by another clone. His gun was knocked from his fist, skittering across the floor. The man on his back began to pound on him with both hands, each blow bringing stars to Tom's eyes. When he was suddenly dead weight on Tom, mashing him onto the corpse below. The weight doubled as another clone tried to climb over them, and another, and another. Tom was being crushed by the pile of bodies and very close to blacking out. He tried to fight it, tried to hold on, but he couldn't draw a breath, and the pain and claustrophobia were so intense he felt like he might go insane. Tom tried one last time to scream out Joan's name, try to warn her. All that came out was a weak moan. It was also on fire, and the drapes, and some of the carpet. Phil Jr. backed away from him, his face pure panic. Help me! Bert watched in horrific fascination as Attila took 2, 3, 4 steps towards the Speaker of the House. Phil Jr. had run out of the room and was cowering next to the railing, hands raised in supplication. Stay away! Attila collapsed on top of him, tangling his limbs in Phil's, setting his benefactor on fire. Their scream mingled into a high-pitched cry that seemed to go on and on. Bert turned away from the horror, focusing on Roy. The cop shuffled into the room, holding his left shoulder. Blood dripped down from his fingertips. Across his chest was a 12-inch slash in the Kevlar vest. Time to go! Bert hurried to him, took a quick look at the wound on his arm. It was deep and ugly, possibly an artery. We have to get out of here. They made it into the hallway, just in time to see 2 people running at them. Tom and Joan? When the figures came into view, Bert almost yelped. They looked like cavemen, dirty and hairy and loping in a strange gait. Bert didn't stop to think about who they were or what they wanted. He still had the bear repellent and he fired straight at them. They rolled onto the floor, wailing and pawing at their faces. Roy mumbled, Jesus, they look like staying. Bert pulled Roy's arm over his shoulder and tried to bear his friend's weight. They half walked, half stumbled to the staircase. Another one of the crazy people was lumbering up the stairs, covered in blood. Bert brought up the can and pressed the trigger. Empty. He threw the can, bouncing it off the lunatic's head. The man kept coming, flailing his arms, eyes crazy. Bert tried to brace himself for the impact, but it was all he could do to hold up the sagging Roy. The man jumped on them, pulling him, kicking. Bert reached for the railing, trying to keep his balance, and then all 3 of them were tumbling feet overhead down the long, grand staircase. Chapter 34. Springfield. Joan heard the gunshot. At the same moment she saw the man running up the stairs. He was followed by 2 more. Joan took 2 steps back, widened her stance. She kept the baton in front of her for a defensive position. The man emerged, hairy, bewildered. Joan did a double take. It looked like a bearded, dirty Phil Jr. Another clone? She tightened her grip, ready to attack. But instead of running at her, the man launched himself at Stang. The old man whimpered, bringing up both frail arms to protect himself. He was quickly yanked out of his wheelchair and thrown to the floor. The other 2 men came up the stairs and joined in the fray, scratching and slobbering and pulling him to pieces. Jo turned around to watch. She took the stairs 2 at a time, moving as fast as she could down. Barely 1 step into the lower hallway, a man reached for her, pulling at her hair. Joan brought the baton down onto his collarbone, and he crumpled to the ground. Ahead of her was a human pile of unwashed, hysterical Stang clones. Joan spotted a hand protruding from the giant mound of bodies. Tom's. She sprinted to his aid. Her first impulse was to grab the gun, start shooting, but that would leave him buried in dead weight. Instead, she pulled and pushed and smacked arms and legs and noses to get the clones to move. Gradually she uncovered Tom's head, bright red from pressure and oxygen deprivation. She grabbed him by the vest and yanked, her feet pushing against the body beneath. Once his upper body came free, he made a sound like a vacuum cleaner. Joan put an ear to his mouth, listening for breath. It was fast and steady. The clones had given her a wide berth, nursing sore arms and heads. There were at least 6 of them in the hall, and God knew how many more were in this dark room. Thanks. Tom had opened his eyes and was staring at her. What the hell is going on, Tom? Tom coughed. Stang's personal organ bank. You can guess or catch-22. If kidney disease is genetic, he keeps replacing his bad kidneys with other bad kidneys. What's wrong with them? Are they crazy? Those scars at the top of their heads are from lobotomies to keep them from knowing what's going on? Joan helped him to his feet, but instead of going back down the hall, Tom limped into the dark room where the clones had been kept. What are you doing? Tom coughed. I think Stang was telling the truth. I think the papers are in here. Could you come up with a safer place to keep them? Maybe there are no papers. Maybe they were destroyed. Stang's ego is too big. He'd never destroy evidence of his scientific triumph. Tom picked up his penlight, groaning at the exertion of bending down. He flashed it into the room. Joan assumed a defensive posture, unsure of what horrors may await, and followed him in. The smell was overwhelming, stale body odor and rotten food. Tom played the small beam of light over 3 rows of stained cots, maybe 20 in all. There was a toilet and sink, cracked and filthy. Along the near wall was a pile of tin dishes, seemingly out of place because they were neatly stacked. Tom flashed the light on the far wall. There was another metal door, complete with keypad. What was the number? Joan approached the panel and tapped in 61694. The door clicked open, and they peered inside. 2 file cabinets, dusty and old. Tom opened the top drawer. Manila folders. We found them. He tried to tilt the file cabinet up onto its side. Heavy. Maybe we can find some suitcases or... Oh, shit. Tom directed his flashlight beam behind them. Joan gasped. 12 of the clones had returned, and they were coming closer. I only have 5 bullets left. Maybe they won't attack? The clones attacked. Joan lashed out with the baton, cracking the nearest clone in the head. He fell backwards, howling. Tom's gun boomed in her eardrums, and another clone went down. Get to the door! Tom tried to grab her wrist, but she held him back. That was a bad move, defensively. Better to keep their backs to the wall, so they couldn't be surrounded. She spun and hit another clone with a reverse kick. Someone grabbed her leg, and she bounced the baton off his face. Another shot. Another moan. Joan Rabbit punched the clone in front of her, driving the aluminum club into his stomach. A second clone tugged at her arm and brought it up to his mouth to bite. She tried to pull away, but another slipped behind her, getting her in a chokehold. Joan watched, horrified, as the biter grinned. His mouth was a sewer of black and rot, and saliva dripped down his chin as he prepared to take out a hunk of Joan's wrist. Joan pivoted, flipping the choker over her hip, dislodging the biter before he had a chance to break the skin. She glanced to her right and watched Tom fire 2 more shots, then get tackled. Swinging her baton like a sword, she slashed her way past several clones and reached Tom, cracking the man on top of him across the temple. He crumpled, and Tom pushed him off. She helped him to his feet, and they faced. Tom fired his last shot. Another sting dropped. There were still 7 left. Joan drew in a breath and tried to center herself. Fear would kill her if she didn't keep her cool. She held up her weapon and let them come to her. The first came at her, howling madly, arms outstretched. She jammed the baton into his solar plexus, and when he doubled over, she smacked him in the back of the neck. Before he hit the floor, she had spun around, connecting with the forehead of another clone, her weapon breaking the skin and blinding him with blood. Someone grabbed her waist. She crunched her heel down on his instep, then jerked her head backwards, cracking it against his jaw. The impact made her dizzy, but he released her. Next to her, she watched Tom swing a clone into the wall, then use the gun like a hammer and smash him across the face. Two more leapt at him, but before she could come to his aid, she was lifted up in a horrible bear hug. Joan's arms were pinned at her sides, and she couldn't throw a punch or swing the baton. Her legs dangled uselessly, almost a foot above the ground. The smell, body odor, and choked her. She tried to twist, tried to pull away, but the clone's grip was too strong. Then she felt his mouth press against her neck. Joan screamed, shaking her head from side to side, dropping her weapon and making her fingers into claws. She scratched at his side, her right hand, finding a bandage and stitches. This was Stang's recent kidney donor. She tore at the sutures, opening the wound, sticking her fingers in deep. The clone howled, releasing her, and dropped to his knees. Joan used the heel of her hand to break his nose, then looked for Tom. He was buried under 3 clones, while another advanced on him, wielding her baton. He raised it up to strike Tom's head, but Joan was on him in 2 steps, launching herself into the air and snapping his knee like a 2x4. Taking the baton away from him was child's play, and she made easy work of the 3 clones atop Tom, each getting a vicious crack to the head. She spun to face the final attacker, flipping the weapon in her hand like a 6-shooter. Blinked, then turned, and ran out the door. "You okay?" Joan helped Tom up. His nose was bleeding, and he had a large scratch across his chin, but otherwise seemed intact. "Yeah, thanks. Let's grab the files and get the hell out of here." They went back to the file cabinets and took what they could carry. It would take a few more trips to get them all, but Roy and Bert could help. Joan led the way through the hall, up the stairs. She tried not to look at Stang's body, but curiosity made her look anyways. He had been torn to pieces, an arm missing, a leg missing, and in some places the flesh was ripped down to the bone. Joan also noted that several of his organs seemed to be missing. The clones had taken them back. "Do you smell smoke?" They hurried through the mansion, the hallway getting brighter with every step. When they reached the foyer, the blaze already descended half of the staircase. It was a huge wall of flame, roaring and out of control. Joan had never seen anything that provoked such a primal fear in her. She looked up and saw the fire was actually crawling across the ceiling, sparks and flaming bits of wood and plaster falling down like rain and igniting the carpeting. "Roy!" At the bottom of the staircase were 2 figures lying on the ground. Tom and Joan ran to them, the heat increasing with every step. Through the thickening smoke, Joan could see Tom kneel down next to Roy. She looked at the other man. It was one of the clones, neck bent in a funny position. The fire crept slowly down the stairs, engulfing paintings and wallpaper, kicking up the temperature with every step down. A cinder blew into the flames, and they caught and began to burn. Joan dropped them all and kicked them away. "Where's Bert?" Joan heard a horn. She spun around and noticed one of the front doors was open. In the driveway was a black cat. The window rolled down, and Bert waved frantically from the driver's seat. "Come on!" Joan noticed that one of the manila folders she had dropped had the word "classified" stamped on it. On impulse, she bent down and shoved it into her vest. Then she hurried to Tom and helped him drag Roy towards the front door, the fire close behind them. A section of ceiling collapsed to their right, and when it hit the floor, they were showered in sparks. Joan batted out flames in her hair, on her pants, and on Roy's chest. When she looked up, she almost wet herself. Standing in front of the doorway was Jerome. In one hand he held a shotgun, and in the other an axe. His muscular upper body was bare, and his chest and face were covered with streaks of something. It took Joan a moment to realize what it was. War paint. It flanked him on both sides, shadow and light flickering across his stone-like features, smoke rising behind him. He looked like a demon risen from hell. Jerome leveled the gun at the trio and fired just as Tom yanked her to the side. She felt a tug in her leg, as if someone had slapped her, and then the pain came. Tom pulled her and Roy behind a leather couch. The shotgun boomed again, and more flaming plaster fell from the ceiling, causing the sofa to catch fire. Joan took a quick look at her leg, and blood appeared black in the orange glow. She tried to stand up, but it couldn't support her weight. Tom grabbed an end table, which was partially engulfed in flame, and tossed it at Jerome. He dodged it, running to their left. Joan noticed he had a strap over his shoulder, and on his back was a machine gun. Joan looked at Roy, semi-conscious on the floor, and turned to Tom. He was tying his shirt around his bloody arm, and she realized he had also been shot. The doorway was less than 20 feet away, but it might as well have been 20 miles. Joan knew, with startling clarity, they were all gonna die. Chapter 35, Springfield. The sound rose above the cracking of the flames, and it made Tom's blood freeze. He recognized it from old westerns, an Apache war cry. He chanced to look over the couch and watched Jerome pump the shotgun and aim. Tom ducked, realizing it was futile. The pellets would rip through the sofa easily. He wrapped his arms around Joan, hoping his body would shield her from the blast, and braced himself. There was a gunshot, but not in their direction. Tom looked down the hall and saw a staying clone do a bloody pirouette and collapse in a pile. Two more clones hopped over their fallen brother and beelined for Jerome. Buoyed by the thought of living a few more seconds, Tom scanned around him for a weapon. There, in Roy's pocket, the taser. He grasped it, checking the battery and the CO2 cartridge. It seemed functional. Another shotgun blast, and then another. Tom peered over the couch and saw Jerome was now wrestling with a clone for the gun. He let go, shoving the clone away, and took the tomahawk from his holster, swinging it wildly, and another war cry. Tom crawled around the sofa, his bleeding arm shaking badly because it was supporting most of his weight. His other hand gripped the taser, pointing it at Jerome. He got within 20 feet. 15 feet. Jerome finished mauling the clone and stared impassively at Tom. He dropped the bloody axe and unslung the M16 hanging on his back. Tom wasn't sure if he was within the range of the taser, but he didn't have a choice. He aimed, fired, missed. Jerome brought the rifle around, his fingers seeking the trigger. Tom knew there was nothing he could do, no place he could run. The M16 would chew him into hamburger before he even had a chance to blink. Then Bert came rushing through the front door and swatted Jerome alongside the head with the step. Jerome released the gun and fell to his knees. Bert raised the ladder to hit him again, but Jerome blocked the blow with his forearm. Tom dropped the taser and crawled like mad for the shotgun, lying next to the hacked-up clone. He pulled it away from the mangled body and racked a shell into the chamber. "Bert! Duck!" Bert ducked. Tom fired. This time he didn't miss. The blast knocked Jerome backwards, leaving a mist of blood where he previously stood. "Behind you!" Bert shrieked. Tom rolled onto his back and aimed at another staying clone, running straight at him. He pumped and fired, and the clone went down. Tom squinted through the smoke and saw Joan slowly dragging Roy towards the front door. Bert ran to help her. Tom went to join them, then was forced to dive to the side when the grand staircase collapsed, causing a giant wave of fire to wash across the room. Tom smelled burning hair, realized it was his, and dropped the gun to pat it out. He searched for Joan, but visibility was near zero. Tom couldn't even see the front door. "Joan! Tom! Here!" Tom crawled towards the voice, through the smoke, around pockets of burning floor. Soot stung his eyes, burned his throat. Was this even the right direction? The fire was roaring now, loud as a thunderstorm, and he wasn't even sure if someone touched his hand through the haze. Joan? No. Jerome. The man's wrist locked around Tom's wrist like a bear trap. Tom tried to pull back. It was his wounded arm. and the movement brought agony. He pried at Jerome's iron fingers, but they wouldn't budge. Tom's legs also became ridiculously hot, and he swiveled his head around and saw his pants had caught on fire. He twisted, trying to pat them out, but couldn't reach with Jerome's death grip on his wrist. Tom panicked, frantically feeling the floor around him for some sort of weapon. His fingers brushed something wet, the axe. Tom cried out in pain and fury and brought the blade down on Jerome's wrist, severing their bond. Then he sat up and tried to beat out the flames on his legs, and that didn't work. He stretched out lengthwise and rolled for all he was worth. He kept rolling until he hit something hard, a wall or a piece of furniture, but he was still on fire, and it was getting bigger. The heat had begun to burn. Tom felt behind him, hoping to find drapes, but instead his hand met cool glass. He noticed the faint blue light through the smoke and realized he'd bumped into the aquarium. The axe still in hand, Tom crashed it against the glass, showering himself in salt water and tropical fish. The tank was huge enough to forge a path through the fire, which Tom crawled through. "Tom!" Joan. And this time Tom was sure the sound came from his left. He followed it, felt someone grab his leg. "Raise the axe." It was Bert. He tugged Tom the rest of the way through the front door, out into the cool night air. There were sirens in the distance, approaching fast. "We have to go!" Bert helped Tom into the back seat of the Cadillac next to Joan. Then he hopped into the driver's seat, made sure Roy had his belt on, petted the cat in his lap, and punched the gas. Tom turned around in the back seat to look at the house one last time. He was surprised at how large the fire had gotten. The whole house had become an inferno. Flames had broken through the roofing, sharp fingers tearing at the night sky, blocking out the stars with black smoke. He felt pressure on his bad arm, Joan's hand, trying to stop the bleeding. "How's Roy?" Tom asked, no one in particular. "I think both legs are broken," Bert answered, "but he's breathing okay. How about you two?" Joan gave Tom a squeeze. "We'll live, but a hospital would be a good idea." Tom nodded. "But not in Springfield, Bert. Go east on 72 to Decatur. We don't want to be connected with this." Bert glanced in the rear view, his eyes locked on Tom's. "What happened to Stang Sr.?" "If you wanted to be technical, I guess you could say he killed himself." 3 big fire engines passed them on the road, racing towards the mansion. Tom closed his eyes and took a deep cleansing breath. They had won. "Hey," Joan shook him lightly. "One more thing?" "What?" Joan moved closer. Her face was covered in soot, and one eyebrow was singed off, and she had some blood on her cheek. But her blue eyes were clear and wide and focused. Tom could feel her breath and her hand on the back of his head. She was, no doubt, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life. Tom didn't know if she kissed him or if he kissed her, but he did know that when their lips met, every ache and pain in his body disappeared. Chapter 36. Decatur. Tom switched off the news on TV and turned to look at his partner in the hospital bed. "They think it was some kind of slavery operation." Roy's words were dulled by the pain medication. Both of his legs were in cast, and his right arm in a sling. This was the first time in almost a full day that he had been well enough to talk. "That's a guess. Lots of burned bodies, but only 4 that had dental work, plus a dungeon in the basement." Roy smiled sleepily. "Be interesting to see what happens if they run DNA tests." "It sure will be." "You cool here?" Tom nodded. "Told the doctors it was a hunting accident. Pretty dramatic one. Campfire out of control, falling trees, shooting at a bear. If you were awake, you would have enjoyed the story." "Joan okay?" "She came out of surgery after me. She's fine." "Bert?" Tom laughed, completely unscathed. "He saved all of our lives coming back for us." "I'm starting to like that guy. Reminds me of my little brother." Tom crossed his legs, wincing at the pain. The burns were only first degree, aka sunburn, but it stretched from his butt to the soles of his feet. His butt actually got the worst of it. The hospital had actually given Tom an inflatable donut. That's 3 for 3. His arm wound wasn't serious. He'd caught a few pellets and would be sore for a while, same as Joan. Roy had taken the brunt of the damage. Tom didn't bother to tell him that his dislocated shoulder probably had nothing to do with the fall, but rather their attempts to drag him out of the burning house. "How about the FBI?" Roy asked. "I talked to the in charge in Chicago. He's driving here tomorrow. I figure we tell him the truth. There should be enough evidence still intact at Sting's house to back it up. $5 as the government keeps it hush-hush. I won't take that bet." "Is this a private party, or can anyone attend?" Roy and Tom smiled. I did it again. "Is this a private party, or can anyone attend?" Roy and Tom smiled at Bert as he walked into the hospital room. Tom was especially pleased to see who Bert had brought with him. The face, the eyes, the beard, all perfect. He felt like he was in the presence of a celebrity. Tom extended his hand. "Mr. Lincoln." "Mr. Jefferson." Abe winked at Roy. "Mr. Hendricks." Roy shook his head and grinned. "Hi, Abe. How was jail?" "Good. I made some friends, caught up on my reading, got all that free publicity. Best thing I ever did." Tom nodded. "I saw the morning paper. Something about Congress suppressing free speech in the Capitol building. You've become a poster boy for the First Amendment." Abe winked. "I just landed a talent agent. We're considering commercial work, starting small. Coke, McDonald's, Chevrolet. I told Bernie to try and land me a porno, but he didn't think that'd be good for the image." "What brings you out this way?" Roy asked. "I had something." Bert beamed. "Monthly Lincoln Police Department auction. They raise money by auctioning off things they've confiscated. You know, stolen cars, bikes, antique lures found at a murder scene." "I actually thought $40 was kind of high," Abe said, "but since I was there, I felt obliged to buy something." Roy laughed. "Why, Abe, how honest of you." At least I could do. If it wasn't for you guys, I'd still be selling cars instead of making the big Hollywood bucks." "So you're back in business?" Tom asked Bert. "Actually, no. I sold the rest of my lures and bought some property in New Mexico." "You didn't." "It's gonna take a few weeks to get my new ostrich farm up and running, but I expect all of you to visit when I do, especially at Thanksgiving." Roy smiled wide. "Good for you, buddy. I'm proud for you." "Hey, I got you guys something. This is for you, Tom." Bert handed him an envelope. Tom dumped the contents into his palm. It was green, with hooks. "A loony frog." "Thanks, Bert." "Yeah, probably need to clean it. There's still some small bits of... Anyways, you should clean it." "This one's for you, Roy." Bert took a DVD out of his pocket. The classic movie, The Love Bug. A Disney movie starring, you guessed it, Slugbug. "Slugbug yellow, no hitbacks." Bert whacked Roy on his good arm. "No fair," Roy laughed, beating up on a cripple. Bert's face became serious. "How are you doing, Roy?" "Because I was on vacation when it happened, I only get partial disability. Gonna walk with a limp, probably for life. They say I could come back to work in a limited capacity, but pushing papers? I don't know. It ain't for me." Bert stared at Roy hard. "You know, I'm gonna need a lot of help on the ranch." "You're serious? Me and you in the desert chasing giant chickens around?" Bert nodded. "Eating jumbo omelets. Might be something to consider." Tom noticed that the small hospital room was becoming a bit cramped, but he felt his heart rate increase when one more person joined them. "Oh my God, is that Abe Lincoln?" Joan came into the room and Abe gave her a big hug. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Ark." Joan closed the door and faced them, looking serious. I'm glad you're all here. We need to talk. Is that ever a good thing when you hear that phrase? Just wondered. Tom noted the manila folder Joan was carrying, with classified written on the side. Is that from Staines? Yeah, it's the only file I managed to save. Y'all need to take a look at this. Bert opened the file and flipped through it. As he read, his face became progressively grimmer. Don't keep us in suspense, Roy said. Spill. Bert held up a paper. This first page, it's a list of the 10 Dr. Harold created. Me, you, Abe, the others with numbers on their hills. He handed it to Tom. Yeah, these are the 10. So? Bert handed him the next page. Tom stared at it. The first name that stood out was Jerome Huntington, the crazy Navy SEAL Stang had working for him. Printed next to his name was Clone of Geronimo. Tom scanned down the page, seeing many other famous names, some of them real doozies, and just like the first page, there were numbers next to them, 11 through 20. Let me see. Roy took the paper and read through it. You mean to tell me there are 10 more clones of famous people running out there? 9 more, Tom frowned. Minus Geronimo? Very famous war Apache, Native American warrior. Very bloodthirsty. 9 more? Abe reached for the page. Tell me one of them is Marilyn Monroe. So what do we do about this, Tom? Bert asked. Roy nodded. Yeah, Tom. Tom shook his head. The FBI can take care of it. I'm done. I did my part. This is no my business. There's some very bad people on this list, Tom. Joan put a hand on his shoulder. Who knows what they could be doing out in the world? Tom couldn't believe that came from Joan. Don't you want to go back to living a normal life? A safe life? Could anyone in the world be safe with number 17 running around? Number 18's even worse, Bert said. And 20's pretty bad, too. Tom's shoulders slumped. It's not our fight. You know, Abe grabbed his lapels and rocked back on his heels. There were a lot of people who didn't want to stand up to King George in 1776. A lot of them said it wasn't their fight, but a few of them did. One of them was a guy named Thomas Jefferson. Tom sighed. Corny as it sounded, Abe was right. Ultimately, it didn't matter why Tom was the way he was. It might have been genetics. It might have been the way he was raised. It might have been something totally unique to him. Tom had no choice but to follow his nature, wherever his nature came from. Okay, he said, standing up and taking Joan's hand. Who should we try to find first? The end. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I love y'all. What do you think? Should I do another?